recording it now, hopefully. So now, Gulliver's Travels, the second novel that we are going to read, is Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift. And very similar to Robinson Crusoe, Gulliver's Travels is also a very one of the most famous books in English literature and in world literature especially. And the fame of the book comes from its name, and probably this is one of the few books in world literature, few lucky books in world literature, because wherever you go in the world, everybody might have heard about Gulliver's Travels, like Shakespeare's works, like Robinson Crusoe, like Don Quixote. So, for this reason, even though they have read it or not, people know about Gulliver's Travels, and they know about the fact that Gulliver is a sailor who is on a desert island and who goes to the land of the tiny people, and then afterwards he goes to the land of the giants. And like Robinson Crusoe, Gulliver's Travels is also an example of travel writing. And he is also a sailor, like Robinson Crusoe, and he goes on a desert island. Well, he goes to several places, several different continents, and he goes through several adventures. Another similarity between Robinson Crusoe and Gulliver's Travels is that, same as Robinson Crusoe, people know only a part of Gulliver's Travels. People know about the novel Robinson Crusoe, only the parts in which Robinson meets Friday. So the relationship between Robinson and Friday becomes the most famous part of Daniel Defoe's novel, and in Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels, the most famous part becomes his adventures in Lilliput, in the land of the tiny people, and his adventures in the land of the giants, Brobdingnag. However, the book is not all about these two places. There are two more places, so there are 4 continents that Gulliver has traveled to. And in those 4 continents, he meets several important people, and he rewrites the history of the world. Gulliver's Travels is probably my most favorite novel, because of the reason that Gulliver's Travels is a very ideological, very political book, and it is a criticism of the governmental powers. It is a criticism of the empires, criticism of the power holders. And I love this book because I have a problem with the concept of power. I think that power corrupts people. Power is corruption. And this is the reason I enjoy reading Gulliver's Travels, because it has a standpoint against the government systems. It has a standpoint against the state systems, and a powerful criticism against the concept of power, against the use of the concept of power in the world. And also, Gulliver's Travels, in some places of the novel, Gulliver's Travels recreates the world history, and it introduces us an alternative history of the world, an alternative history, alternative geography, alternative government systems in the fantastic lands. Having said fantastic lands, I have to mention that if Gulliver's Travels had not been written at all, we wouldn't have been reading today the novels like Lord of the Rings or the novels like Harry Potter, because it is one of the forefathers of fantastic fiction. Fantastic fiction is always set in a fantastic land, not in the present reality of the world. The present reality of the world is a believable place. However, there are so many unbelievable events happen in the present reality of the world. And in the fantastic world, in the fantastic world of fantastic fiction, there are so many events that are not real, but however they refer to the real life, and that is the wonderful thing about fantastic fiction. So many of the things that Gulliver talks about in this novel are referring to the real life, referring to the real states rather than the imaginary states of the world. And this is why Gulliver's Travels is a very important book. And apart from that, Gulliver's Travels bears significant differences from Robinson Crusoe, although significant similarities to Robinson Crusoe. The similarities being, yes, they are both sailors, yes, they are both examples of travel writing, but the differences are, in Robinson Crusoe, there are elements of imperialism. However, in Gulliver's Travels, the traces and the models of imperialism cannot be seen. Instead, for instance, when Gulliver goes to the desert, to those strange places, he doesn't try to teach his language, but he learns their language. He doesn't try to change those people, but he tries to adapt himself to those places. So let me begin from the novel. In the first page, well, you're lucky because the chapters are shorter in Gulliver's Travels, so you can follow me easily. And also in different editions of the book, the same chapter divisions occur even in different editions of the book. In Robinson Crusoe, it was different. Different editions had different chapter divisions and different chapter titles, so it was difficult for you to follow me. But here you'll find it easier. Even if you do not have this edition, you will be able to follow me where I am. The book consists of 4 parts. The first part is called A Voyage to Lilliput. And in A Voyage to Lilliput, in A Voyage to Lilliput, Lilliput is an island. You're going to see, maybe show you a map here on the first page, and also for here, the map. And in this map, you will see that there are 2 islands which are very close to each other, Blefuscu and Lilliput. He goes to Lilliput. The first chapter is titled as A Voyage to Lilliput. My father had a small estate in Nottinghamshire, and I was the 3rd of 5 sons. He sent me to Emmanuel College in Cambridge at 14 years old. Emmanuel College is a very important college where only the wealthy families can send their children for education, and it was a very prestigious school which provided a very good education to children. So it shows us that Gulliver didn't come from a poor family, but he came from an upper class family who were able to send him to Emmanuel College, where I resided 3 years and applied myself close to my studies. But the charge of maintaining me being too great for a narrow fortune, I was bound apprentice to Mrs. James Bates, an eminent surgeon in London, with whom I continued 4 years. And my father now and then sending me small sums of money, I laid them out in learning navigation and other parts of the mathematics useful to those who intend to travel, as I always believed it would be some time or other my fortune to do. It's important that although he was having an education of medicine to become a doctor, he saves the money that his father sends him, and then he gets lessons of navigation in sailing. This shows us that one of the similarities between these 2 novels, Gulliver's and Robinson Crusoe, is that they both reject the traditional lifestyle. They both reject the traditional morality of their families, and they want to go outside to the world, and they want to explore the other places of the world in order to find out and learn and discover. On the other hand, Lemuel Gulliver, very much like Robinson Crusoe, Lemuel Gulliver is against the middle-class lifestyle, and he wants a difference. He wants a change in his life. So this is why he wants to set sails to the sea. He wants to have adventures across the oceans. When I left Mr. Bates, I went down to my father, where, by the assistance of him and my Uncle John and some other relations, I got £40 and the promise of £30 a year to maintain me at Leiden. There I studied physics 2 years and 7 months, knowing it would be useful in long voyages. So, we're not going into details because the writer doesn't go into the details of his journeys, because his journeys and the storms and everything, the shipwreck, they only function as a link between the adventures. Therefore, on the next page and the next paragraph, it wouldn't be proper for some reasons to trouble the reader with the particulars of our adventures in those seas, he says. It's important, as I told you before, in the 18th century we hear the author's voice a lot. We call it authorial voice, as you may remember. And it wouldn't be proper, he says, to trouble the reader. So the reader becomes a part of this book. And in the 18th century, the novelists did that a lot. We saw this in Robinson Crusoe, we saw this in Pamela, and we saw this in A Sentimental Journey. The writers, all of these writers used the reader. All of these writers speak to the reader, or they speak about the reader. Let it suffice to inform him that in our passage from thence to the East Indies, we were driven by a violent storm to the northeast of Van Diemen's Land. By an observation, we found ourselves in the latitude of 30 degrees 2 minutes south. 12 of our crew were dead by immoderate labor and ill food. The rest were in a very weak condition. 6 of the crew, of whom I was one, having let down the boat into the sea, made a shift to get clear of the ship and the rock. So they have a shipwreck, and 6 sailors get on the lifeboat, and they try to row to the coast. But we rowed by computation about 3 leagues, till we were able to work no longer, being already spent with labor while we were in the ship. We therefore trusted ourselves to the mercy of the waves, and in about half an hour the boat was overset by a sudden flurry from the north. What became of my companions in the boat, as well as those who escaped on the rock or were left in the vessel, I cannot tell, but conclude they were all lost. For my own part, I swam as fortune directed me, and was pushed forward by wind and tide. I often let my legs drop, could feel no bottom, but when I was almost gone and able to struggle no longer, I found myself within my death, and by this time the storm was much abated. So, in a very similar way to Robinson's adventure, Gulliver has also a shipwreck, and he struggles against the waves. He tries to swim in the waves and in the storm, and he's dashed to the rocks of an island, swept ashore or washed ashore. I often let my legs drop and could feel no bottom. But when I was almost gone, able to struggle no longer, I found myself within my death, and by this time the storm was much abated. The declivity was so small that I walked near a mile before I got to the shore, which I conjectured was about 8 o'clock in the evening. I then advanced forward near half a mile, but could not discover any sign of houses or inhabitants. At least, I was in so weak a condition that I did not observe them. I was extremely tired, and with that, the heat of the weather, about half a pint of brandy that I drank as I left the ship, I found myself much inclined to sleep. So, because of his tiredness and because of the brandy he drank the previous night, he wants to sleep. But however, when when he lies down on the grass, he notices that the grass is so short and it is very, very soft. So he sleeps one of the most comfortable sleeps of his life. I lay down on the grass, which was very short and soft, where I slept sounder than ever I remember to have done in my life. And as I reckoned, above 9 hours, for when I awaked, it was just the daylight. I attempted to rise, but was not able to stir. For as I happened to lie on my back, I found my arms and legs were strongly fastened on each side to the ground, and my hair, which was long and thick, tied down in the same manner. Okay. You see that in the cover page of the book, okay, in the cover page of the book, you can see Gulliver is tied down by so many tiny people here, and he is tied down by his legs and by his hair, so he cannot move. I found my arms and legs were strongly fastened on each side to the ground, and my hair, which was long and thick, tied down in the same manner. I likewise felt several slender ligatures across my body, from my armpits to my thighs. So imagine that you feel several tiny creatures walking on your body, as if they are insects or tiny mice walking. And he doesn't know what they are because he cannot look down. He is tied to the ground and he can only look upwards to the sun. He cannot see below, so he cannot see what is going on his body. I could only look upwards. The sun began to grow hot and the light offended my eyes. Yes, the eyes are offended by the sun. The sun is too strong, hot and very, very bright. I heard a confused noise about me, but in the posture I lay, I could see nothing except the sky. In a little time, I felt something alive moving on my left leg, which advancing gently forward over my breast came almost up to my chin. When bending my eyes downwards as much as I could, I perceived it to be a human creature not 6 inches high, with a bow and arrow in his hands and a quiver at his back. So when he's lying down, he can only look with his eyes downwards, but he cannot, rise his head to see downwards. And a little person climbs up to his chin, and he can see that something, a very small creature, a human being, is standing on his chin. And it is funny that this man is only 6 inches high. So an inch is about 3 centimeters. So this person is must be about 18 centimeters. And so he's standing here with a bow and arrow in his hands, so aiming at Gulliver to shoot him with an arrow. And you see, I was in the utmost astonishment, because he can feel that, he can see that 40 other small, tiny human beings are walking behind the first person. And I was in the utmost astonishment and roared so loud that they all ran back in a fright, and some of them, as I was afterwards told, were hurt by the falls they got by leaping from my sides upon the ground. So he shouts at them, he roars aloud, and so many people escape because of the power of his voice, and by escaping they fall off from his body, fall to the ground, and some of them even break their legs or arms. And however, they soon returned, and one of them, who ventured so far as to get a full sight of my face, lifting up his hands and eyes by way of admiration, cried out in a shrill but distinct voice, "Hekina, the ghoul!" Jonathan Swift, the writer, is a very good linguist, and he creates an imaginary language here, and he doesn't provide the translation of those words. And in this imaginary language, you without the translation, you feel the same alienation, same strangeness that Gulliver feels, because the author wants us to feel that strangeness. We are also feeling like a stranger in the book, because we hear that language with no translation. So by reading the same words a few times, the writer wants us to understand, wants us to work out the meaning, instead of giving us the meaning. And Hekina de Gul, when the leader says, Hekina de Gul, and all the other crowd shouts after him, Hekina de Gul, Hekina de Gul. I lay all this while, as the reader may believe, in great uneasiness, at length struggling to get loose. I had the fortune to break the strings and wrench out the pegs that fastened my left arm to the ground. For, by lifting it to my face, I discovered the methods they had taken to bind me. And at the same time, with a violent pull which gave me excessive pain, I a little loosened the strings that tied down my hair on the left side, so that I was just able to turn my head about 2 inches. But the creatures ran off a second time before I could seize them, whereupon there was a great shout in a very shrill accent. After it ceased, I heard one of them cry aloud, Tolga Fonak! When in an instant I felt above 100 arrows discharged on my left hand, which pricked me like so many needles. And besides, they shot another flight into the air, as we do bombs in Europe, whereof, I suppose, fell on my body, and some on my face, which I immediately covered with my left hand. So one of the guys, probably a commander, shouts to the crowd, Tolga Fonak! As soon as he shouts Tolga Fonak, hundreds of arrows are flying in the air and coming towards Gulliver's face and body, but they are like very tiny needles. So Tolga Fonak must be shoot him. We don't know. The translation is not provided here. Okay, when this shower of arrows was over, I fell a groaning with grief and pain, and again striving again to get loose, they discharged another volley larger than the first, and some of them attempted with spears to stick me in the sides. But by good luck, I had on me a buff jerkin which they could not pierce. Later on, after they tried to attack him and shoot him with the arrows, a huge guy, probably an important guy, the leader, the ruler of the country, comes on horse